What up? What up? Hey, everybody. Welcome. We are continuing the review of the discussion with Emerson Green and Mike Huemer. So let's get into it. We got Harmonica Luke in first for 1,000 Lance Loot. What's up? How you doing? Let's see if we could get two more people. We got Sapir here for 500. And anyone else? I'm not seeing anybody. Okay. Well, let's get started on the video. This is around the location where we were. We got Mason in last for 250. All right. 1 second to fix something, and then we will be good to go. There we go. All right. How's the volume on here?
I like the way you said, well, you have an experience. I mean, in some sense, all of our knowledge comes from experiences, but not in the sense that the empiricists mean, because the empiricists have a restricted notion of the experiences that count, right? Namely, observation by the five senses and maybe introspection. So, and then, intuitions in a sense are supposed to be experiences, but they're just.
So if you recall, I had started to express some skepticism about the existence, the nature, the existence, and so on of intuitions. So my current position is that, what is that? Oh, Sapir is commenting on something. My current position is that I don't actually think philosophical intuitions pick out a genuine and distinct psychological construct or phenomena. I don't think they capture any particular kinds of phenomena. So, this use of the term intuition in philosophy, it might and sometimes is used. Okay, the term is used in a whole bunch of different ways. Sometimes it refers to mundane and definitely real psychological states. It may refer to a disposition to believe some sort of claim, even if one ultimately doesn't end up believing it. It may actually just refer to a belief. It may refer to, some sort of compulsion to believe something. It may refer to what one is inclined to believe prior to certain sorts of reflection or other sorts of conditions that might be met. We might call that a pre-theoretical intuition. We might call something a reflective intuition. So there is the judgment one reaches after consideration, following certain sorts of appropriate standards where one is focused solely on the semantic considerations and not pragmatic considerations. Is one is competent in the relevant, like if one is rendering a linguistic intuition about some case or something like that. So there's a variety of uses, and some of these uses may be completely mundane and refer to real psychological states that already exist. If the term is intended to be used to pick out some sort of sui generis state that couldn't be reduced to or redescribed in conventional psychological terms, I want to see the evidence. I want to see someone have a model of human cognition where they say, okay, well, look, we've got visual perception, we've got memories, we've got judgments, we've got emotions. And one of the things that this view of human cognition fails to account for is the existence of philosophical intuitions, intellectual seemings. This is a term that Huemer uses. Huemer here is describing them as a type of experience. Now, an experience, what does he mean by that? I don't know what he means. So, all of my experiences have a sensorial component. If you want to broaden the notion, and we're not talking about sense experience, but we're talking about some broader notion. He mentions empiricists might be okay with introspection, but when I consider some case like the trolley problem, I don't have an experience about the matter. So if you ask me, hey, do you think you should pull the switch? I'd say yeah, but I don't have an experience of like an experience of true yes, pull the switchness. That the judgment to pull the switch, I experience that as seeming true. There's no sensorial or experiential component to that. I don't have any phenomenology. And so, what I would wonder is when Huemer is talking about intuitions, does he think that because he says they're an experience, do they have phenomenology? And if so, I would like to hear about it. I don't have phenomenology when I render philosophical judgments. So if someone asks me, hey, is 19 a prime number? And I think about it and I go, yeah, I think it is. I don't experience anything that I would consider an intellectual seeming. I might visually picture like what like a 19 looks like with like Roman numerals or something like that, but uh, I don't have any special truth phenomenology. And this holds for literally anything, Gettier cases, philosophical like thought experiments, any sort of thing. I don't have phenomenology. So if philosophers are reporting phenomenology here, I got some questions. So I'm not saying they don't have the phenomenology that they say that they're having, although I'm skeptical. I think maybe they're not. But either they also are not having experiences and mistakenly think that they are, or they are having experiences and now I want to know what those experiences are and what's going on with them. I feel like this is an area that has just not been adequately surveyed by serious cognitive scientists who want to get a handle on what the heck is going on here. And I think that philosophers have been far too quick to assume that their use of the terms that they have, intuition, that sort of thing, that their phenomenology, that their self reports, that their introspection, and that their terminology is up to the task psychologically, that everything that they're saying about what they're doing is true. And I'm not sure that it is. People can be incorrect about what's going on with their own psychology. And without really getting a critical eye on what philosophers are up to and what they're doing and whether they really are having special sorts of phenomenology, what's causing that phenomenology? Are these kind of hallucinations? Is this like apophenia, seeing patterns that aren't there? Is it possible that they have a sort of hallucinatory or quasi hallucinatory set of experiences that are not veridical or are not picking out, they're not tracking truth? It's just something that they learn to do, like seeing auras? Or do they really have some sort of special intellectual faculty that allows them to quote unquote see truth? If they have that faculty, I would assume that there would be some way of empirically evaluating who has the faculty, how it works, what its mechanisms are. I mean, is this supposed to to operate outside the scope of what can be studied by cognitive science? If so, I would find that highly suspicious. I mean, it would amount to something like having a paranormal ability. So, if this is empirically valuable, show me the evidence. If it's not empirically valuable, should I believe in it? Give me one moment. I'm getting a bunch of beep beep beeps on my computer. What is that? Oh, I see. Okay. All right. So let's have a look at the chat and see what's going on here. Oh, Nathan, you're here. Oh, wow. A lot of people. What's up, Andre? What's up, Truth Teller? All right. Truth Teller says, aren't intuitions supposed to have propositional content for humor? If so, then they should be an intentional state, not an experience. I don't know. I don't know what he thinks that they are. All right. Real Time says, I can see the auras and know all truths. All right. Let's keep going with the video.
Different from the sensory experiences. Okay, so like you see this example is from Gilbert Harmon. You see these kids who are torturing this cat, and they're like lighting the cat on fire or something, and you could just see that that's wrong. So
see, what you can just see that that's wrong. Now, is that a metaphor? Or is it intended to be literal? Like, I don't think that you could see that things are wrong. I can see that something is red, or I could see that something is far away, but I can't like literally see that something is wrong. So if I'm seeing metaphorically, what is going on exactly? Like, can you unpack the metaphor? What does that mean to see that something is wrong? Like, we use a lot of visual metaphors. Like if someone explains something and I go, I'm like, why did you do that? That doesn't make any sense. And they explain it and I go, oh, like I might use the term I see to mean I understand. We certainly use the term see in metaphorical ways to convey that we understand something, that we think something, that we believe something, that we've come to recognize the truth of something. Is he using it as a metaphor? What is going on here exactly?
So Yeah, you kind of just see that it's wrong, but you don't like, if a dog.
You don't literally just with your eyes see it. So, okay, so it's not literal seeing with your eyes. It's not like visual perception. So it's some other type of like seeing. Now, I'm okay. I understand with some, so because vision is a common metaphor that we use for other sorts of things. So it's not, it would sound weird to say I smell the truth. I mean, not that weird, I guess. I taste the truth. Someone might say it's, so they were such a liar I could smell it. But again, that's metaphorical. So there's a sense of like a very kind of loose metaphor that you might use for things, and you really are not talking about any genuine type of specific psychological state. Like if someone says, like someone explains something and they go, "Oh, now I see." I'm not trying to say, by seeing, I'm talking about quasi perceptual understanding as a special type of experience. But so like I'm not trying to pick out some special type of psychology, but when philosophers talk about intuitions, are they or are they not? Like, is intuition talk all loose talk, or is there something specific that they're referring to? If it's loose talk, I think they should be more upfront about that, because that's not at all clear. If intuitions are playing such a central role and it's kind of loose, not very systematic or rigorous, that's a little weird to put as the foundation of your methodology, something that is underspecified and unclear and vague and fuzzy and not very distinct, and not sui generis and not picking out anything in particular, and not something that you could point to the specific processes. So that would be weird. But if it is intended to be that, okay, then what is it? Can we unpack this and get more details on what it is and how it works?
Dog sees that, the dog's eyes are just as good as your eyes, and its sensory cortex is just as good, and the dog will not see the wrongness.
Right.
So, like, you're seeing the wrongness depends upon this intellectual faculty, right? And probably depends on your past beliefs, like that pain is bad, and you shouldn't cause bad things without a good reason, or something like that.
Okay. No, that's helpful that like the empiricist makes this distinction, between our experiences.
Intellectual faculty. That's where I have some concerns here. Is there a distinct faculty, and can it be studied as like a specific kind of process or processes? Let's take it back a little.
But
I
kids who are torturing this cat, and they're like lighting the cat on fire or something, and you could just see that that's wrong. So yeah, you kind of just see that it's wrong, but you don't literally just with your eyes see it. Like, if a dog sees that, the dog's eyes are just as good as your eyes, and its sensory cortex is just as good, and the dog will not see the wrongness.
Right.
So, like, you're seeing the wrongness depends upon this intellectual faculty, right? And probably depends on your past beliefs, like that pain is bad, and you shouldn't cause bad things without a good reason, or something like that.
Okay. No, that's helpful that like the empiricist makes this distinction, between our experiences. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that, I mean, I don't want to go off on like a tangent here, but like all these issues about cognitive phenomenology and how certain people like just really don't want to, again, I don't want to like open up a can of worms here, but like the idea that some people don't want to admit that it's like something to solve a math problem, or there's not something.
Look at the phrasing that he used. They don't want to admit it. So if you say someone doesn't want to admit something, typically what this would suggest is that the person does know that something is the case, but they don't want to like say it out loud. They don't want to acknowledge it. And that implies that, like someone like me, that I'm being dishonest, that I know something is true, but I won't admit it. I really don't like that phrasing. I hope that was just not very cautious phrasing, and then he didn't literally or genuinely mean to imply that someone that holds a contrary view is refusing to like admit the truth. Like we genuinely have contrary views about this. I'm not refusing to admit something. And just imagine if I said, Emerson and Huemer won't admit that they really don't have any good reasons for being moral realists or something like that. It would sound like I'm suggesting that they know better and that they're being dishonest. It's not a good way to phrase things. So I want you to hear that again, because I certainly think that is how that would typically be interpreted, and that's not a very good way to phrase things.
And people like,
I mean, either it's intentional, in which case it's a false accusation that the opposition is dishonest, or it's unintentional and it's not meant to imply dishonesty, in which case it's very bad phrasing. I mean, I would not want to unintentionally insult the character of the people that disagree with me.
really don't want to. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that, I mean, I don't want to go off on like a tangent here, but like all these issues about cognitive phenomenology and how certain people like just really don't want to, again, I don't want to like open up a can of worms here, but like the idea that some people don't want to admit that it's like something to solve a math problem, or there's not some.
Yeah, Emerson, it's not like anything for me to solve a math problem. So I'm not refusing to admit it. It really isn't. I don't have experiences like that. Why? And also, like, what if I'm not admitting it? What do you think I'm pretending? Why would I do that? Why would that benefit me? Like, there's plenty of illusionists out there. Maybe there's not plenty. There's not that many illusionists. There's plenty of people that will say, "Oh, this is intuitive," or "I think that way," but ultimately I reject it. I If I thought that way, I would just report that. I don't have a problem with that. I just actually don't think that way. I really don't have those experiences, and it's quite frustrating when people word things in ways where they imply that because they experience things a certain way, other people do and maybe even must experience it that way. And so if they report something to the contrary, they're not like admitting that actually they do have experiences like you. That's a possibility. Uh, is there good evidence for it? Like, is there evidence that these people are pretending or not admitting something that they know they know better or something? Nah, there really isn't. We have people that lack mental imagery. We have people that don't have an internal monologue. I mean, one possibility is that Emerson and Huemer have a different phenomenology than me. It's also possible, and not all phenomenology is veridical, or like I guess you could say benign. So it's not like people that have mental imagery versus people that don't. That the people that don't are, I mean, one, they're not necessarily functionally deficient in any particular way. They might be. I score in the low end of mental imagery. I don't have very clear, good mental imagery. I'm not very good at art. So does having poor mental imagery make you bad at art? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I'm not good at art, but that's a correlation. I have no idea if there's some causal thing there. So there may be differences in the functional consequences of like the type of phenomenology that we have. But one of the things that we do know is that we have evidence, and pretty good evidence, of significant individual variation in phenomenology. Now, one takeaway from that could be that I am cognitively impoverished, that philosophers that have intuitions have certain sorts of veridical phenomenology that I lack. And so I'm like it's almost like I'm like a colorblind artist, and I'm going, where's the color? Where's the color? You can't paint with color. There's no such thing as color. It could be like that. Or it could be that the people that are reporting this phenomenology have they're either mistaking other aspects of their psychology for a special type of phenomenology that they're not really having, or it's possible. And I mentioned these possibilities in the previous video, that people that study or are trained in or learn philosophy acquire a kind of quasi perceptual or quasi experiential sense, or even a sort of genuinely like experiential sense that would border on something like a kind of hallucination. The comparison I give is to seeing auras. So like a guru can train people to think that they could see auras around other people, that they could see like a green energy field or a pink energy field around somebody. And I bet you that there's people that genuinely believe that they could see auras around people. Now, what's going on when they do that? Are they not seeing anything but mistakenly reporting that they see auras when really they're not seeing auras? Maybe. Are they actually seeing auras? Very doubtful. But it's also possible that they are seeing something, but it's a kind of internal projection of their own minds. Like they are, maybe some regions of the visual cortex are activated, and like they connect with some sort of acquired synesthesia where their emotions, like they feel a vibe or an emotion around particular people from looking at their body language or their facial expression or other features of the person. Their emotions get associated with certain colors, and then they like literally parts of the brain associated with color perception are activated. Just like I could imagine a red apple in my mind, they imagine green around the person, and they actually kind of have a sensorial experience of seeing green around the person. In that case, it's a hallucination. The person does not have a green energy field around them. But from the first person point of view, they would look at a person and go, how can you tell me that I'm not seeing a green energy field around this person? I am literally seeing a green energy field around the person. I'm looking at them. There's the green energy field. And maybe you could throw them in an fMRI. I don't know if anyone's done research on this. Parts of the brain associated with color perception are activated, and they are literally seeing green around the person. So something like that, it wouldn't be a person like not seeing green and then mistakenly thinking that they are and reporting it. It'd be them actually seeing green. And so it's possible that the experiential states philosophers report are learned and they're a kind of internal hallucination or projection of some kind. So simply because I don't have them doesn't mean I'm impoverished and philosophers have some like special power that they're using, like an intellectual faculty that's giving them some special access to the truth. It could be very much not that. It could be just like somebody that thinks that they have telepathy or can speak to God in their head. It could be something that they learn to do. It's not what they think it is. They're not actually tracking truths in the world, and they're just wrong about what's going on with their experiences. So I'm kind of leaning that direction, that these like this intellectual phenomenology is something that people do learn to have, but it's not really actually tracking truth or anything. Um, Digital Gnosis says, I don't really think people think about it too hard. They just accept the grammar. I mean, never mind testing the claims empirically with other people. It seems like they don't even try reflecting on it with their own experiences. I've had these conversations asking people to focus on a proposition in their mind and describe the essence of the phenomenology to me. Yeah, I would wonder what that would be like. So it is possible that people are saying these sorts of things, and it's something has gone wildly wrong with their language, and people think that or are saying stuff as if they're having experiences. And when you probe, there's not really an experience there. So I don't know what you think, Nathan, what you think is going on, but this needs to get studied because something funny is going on here. What will not happen is that I will be coerced into saying that I have like sui generis intuitions or I have some special intellectual phenomenology. I don't. I don't. I've thought about it a lot, and I don't have them. Um, again, it's possible. So I'm pretty confident I don't. But someone might say, "But how do you know? Isn't it possible that you're actually misperceiving the contents of your own introspections, and really you do have these experiences, but you don't realize it, or your theoretical commitments are getting in the way of you accurately reporting your phenomenology?" Yeah, that's true. And I would be happy for people that do think that we have intuition, so we have intellectual seemings. If someone out there, as long as they're friendly and they're not going to be a jerk, I'd be happy to sit here and get cross-examined by them for as long as they like. I'll do it 2-3 hours where they could sit down and have a conversation with me, try to get me to introspect, give me exercises, see if I could have these experiences in real time, and I'll do my best to honestly report what my experiences are like. I'm 100% serious about this because I've had people like really sit down and do interventions and say, look, how can you not have it seem like you have qualia? Let's sit down and work through this. Or how can it not seem to you like you have free will? Let's sit down and do this. I haven't had someone do that with the free will. I have had people do that with the qualia one, and it didn't go anywhere. Like people were like, everyone has qualia or feels like they have qualia. How can you not even have the feeling that you have qualia? I don't. And I've had people try to get me to do this. It's been sometimes frustrating, but sometimes fun. It's in any case interesting. So, like, I'm all in for the introspection of someone that thinks I'm wildly mistaken about this and thinks, oh, no, you do have intellectual seemings. You're welcome to be a guest on my channel and try to get me to have them. Of course, some people might think I'm lying or something. I can't prove I'm not. So, maybe you'll just not believe me, but there's only so much I could do. All right. Nathan goes on, I think he means I see a state of affairs and then I just say it's wrong. I mean, that would be my take on it, but that's obviously not what other people think is going on. But you don't see what you see in addition to the image that it's wrong. Yeah. Mason Colbert says, is it possible to detach or separate your seeings? Do you mean seeings or seemings? I'm not sure if you actually meant seeings there with your assessments. I don't know. Nathan goes on, the thing is, there's nothing about the private nature of my visual experience that plays a role in my saying it's wrong. I think that's the core. Sapir says, yeah, it's a non-visual seeing, more of a noticing of wrongness. I do think like seeing is a metaphor for a kind of phenomenology. I mean, it's not literal seeing, I don't think. Although there are people, I think Preston Werner and other people argue for like literal moral perception. Although I don't know quite how literal It is. I saw one paper on this a long time ago. I don't remember what I read. Nathan says, from seeing a scene visually to seeing the wrongness is just a little slip of grammar. It seems like it's more than just a little slip of grammar to me, because what they go on to describe, it's not like they just say, it seems, I see the wrongness. And you say, do you mean that literally? And they go, yeah, that would be a problem. But they don't say that, at least typically. They go on to say stuff about intellectual seemings, and there's, there are sensory experiences, but there are also these non-sensory experiences. So it does seem like people that have a different view on the matter really are report a kind of phenomenology or experience. I don't, as far as I could tell, I don't have it. And the main thing that I would like for us to get on the same page about is that I don't have it, and whether or not they do. It's quite frustrating when people seem to think that they have a certain kind of phenomenology, and so I must have the same phenomenology. If they think that that's true, I'm happy to cooperate with any empirical stuff they want to do to try to confirm that. I'm serious about that. Like, put me in an MRI, whatever. If they think that I must have, or I do have the experiences that they report having, we can test it. I mean, ultimately, you're there to some degree going to have to rely on self-reports. So maybe people will just think I'm just lying or super confused, but there's only so much I could do. All right. I'm still getting over this cold. 1 second. Someone, no Wehrman says, any comment on animal moral perception studies? I don't know anything. I don't know of any studies on animal moral perception. So if Nathan, do you think there's a good question I can ask people? Like, I could poll people in the audience about their own phenomenology, or I am curious, like, maybe I don't need to write up a poll. For people in the chat, can you talk about your own experience? So let's say I ask you a question like, is 29 a prime number? Well, one moment, dog's barking. 1 second. Sorry, dogs got real barky for some reason. So the question I wanted to ask, so think of a number like 29, and then I pose a question: is 29 a prime number? Think about that. Think. Now, when you come to a conclusion, what experiences ended up like occurring as you did that? Did you imagine like a visual image of a number in your mind? Did you like picture a 29? Did it seem like it was projected out into your visual field somewhere? When you came to the conclusion that yes, it is, or no, it's not, I don't actually know if it's a prime number or not. Man, trying to stream when you have just persistent cough is really annoying. Anyway, shit, that's annoying. Interruptions, I hate them. So when you're thinking that through, and you go, oh yeah, it is a prime number, or oh no, it's not. Is it a prime number? I should pick numbers I actually know. Yeah, it's a prime number. So when you reach a conclusion, yes, it's a prime number. Is that, yes, it's a prime number? Like, do you have an experience? Is there phenomenology? And if so, can you say something about what that phenomenology is like? And if that one doesn't do it for you, think of something like the trolley problem, and we'll consider the footbridge case. So here's a scenario, right? If one that's more robustly philosophical. I still want to hear your answer to the math one, but now consider this case. You're standing over a bridge. There is a person with a really big backpack, like they got a bunch of heavy stuff with them. And there's a train headed down the tracks. Now, the brakes on the train are broken. there are 5 workers on the track. They got like earmuffs on, the ear protection or something. They can't hear the train coming. It's going to hit them. It's definitely going to kill all 5 of them if it continues on. But if you just give a light shove to this person with a big backpack, they're going to fall off. They're going to fall to their death, and their dead body and all the heavy stuff that they brought with them. That big lump will stop the train, and it'll kill that person. Will already be dead, I guess. So they'll be dead. So you kill the one person to save the 5 people. Now, do you think it would be morally permissible to shove the person to their death in order to stop the train from hitting the 5 people that are on the track and killing them? Like, in other words, is it okay to kill the one person to save the 5 people? Now, when you reach a conclusion about that, no, I don't think it would be morally permissible, or yes, I do think it would be morally permissible. You might even think it would be morally obligatory. You might think it would be morally prohibited. Whatever your conclusion is there some sort of intellectual experience that you're having when that goes on? Because, like, if you ask me that question the first time, maybe I'll go, I don't want to shove someone to their death. Like, there's certainly going to be emotions that I'm having, like not like super extreme ones, because I understand it's a hypothetical. It's not like you're handing me a knife and saying, you got to gut that person. It's not like that. So it's not that graphic. It's very, very, hypothetical, unrealistic. But there's going to be little glimmers of emotions and some experiences that I would have. But if I think about that and I go, nah, I don't think I push that person, or, I don't think you should push that person, something like that. Do you have an experience when you reach that conclusion? And if so, what kind of experience? Do you have intellectual phenomenology? I'm going to go through the chat. We'll see what people say about all that. All right. Still going through. Yeah, Mason says something about fMRI getting false positives. I'm not an expert on those sorts of methodological issues, but there are methodological issues everywhere in the sciences. So it'd be nice to talk to somebody that knows more about fMRI and what the issues are with it. Facundo says there's an important issue with stuff like reporting qualia. I can convince people who used to report qualia that they actually don't have qualia. How does that fit with their notions? It's a good question. I don't know. I mean, someone could say that your theoretical commitments can like override your like, I don't know, first person experiences or something. So you could somehow convince a person, hey, I know it looks like there's a tree over there, but there's not really a tree over there. And they're still technically seeing a tree, but they're like, yes, there's no tree. So maybe you're doing like you're Orwelling people and you're convincing them to say 2 + 2 = 5. Facundo says, I'm convinced that if smart people who believe in qualia and report qualia read Dennett, they would stop reporting qualia. I don't know how many Dennett people like to shit on him and his work a lot. Oh, like more like consciousness explained away. Ha 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 ha. A lot of the critics, when I've asked them, have not actually read much of his work, if any. So maybe if I certainly think if some of them read it, they're going to become convinced. But I think a lot of people wouldn't be anyway. So, Patriot, if this is a response to my question about phenomenology? No, you don't even have to consider it for me. Then, okay, that's interesting. Nowhere Man says 29 is a prime number. Yeah, I'm trying to get caught up. I'm about 5 minutes behind. Nathan says, when you say is 29 a prime number, I begin thinking of operations or factorizing. Facundo says 29, quote, feels like a prime number. Nathan says, and there's no particular phenomenology of that to me, so I hallucinate a voice in my head going 1 to 29, 29 times. Can 2 go? Can 3 go? Yeah, you might have like some kind of like sub vocalization or something like that. Or you like think the words out. You have a little internal monologue. Looking through, seeing. Edgar says no experience. Just quickly check for multiples of 29 apart from 1 and 29. Yeah, and there might be experience to like doing math in your head. So if I say like what's 7 plus 21, oh well, maybe you just know the answer to that. But if we get big enough numbers, you might start doing mental operations in your head. Like what if I say what's 119 plus 344? Like do you start doing anything quasi visually in your mind? Because I think I might. I'd have to like sit there and like do it out in my head. If you're forced to do mental math for something you didn't memorize, is there a visual component to that? But even when you arrive at a conclusion, I don't feel like there's like a eureka moment where I'm like, and I lock in on the truth that has any sort of experiential quality to it. We got Faith because of reason saying, yo, what's up, y'all? Always fun to have you here. Did I miss the giving of land salute? Yes, you did. That was a while ago. It was like 40 minutes ago. What are you talking about? Yeah, how is it going in your neck of the woods? I mean, we interact with very different communities. So, I mean, you're probably still dealing with all the rabid moral argument stuff and, whatever's going on over there. All right. So Pierce says, Kane has a video about moral cluelessness that I feel might be relevant somehow. Faith says, I've read Dennett's work. Don't care for it. What did you read from Dennett? Did you read Consciousness Explained? I'm always kind of bummed out when people don't appreciate Dennett's work. I think Consciousness Explained is an extremely important work. I think it's brilliant. It's really good stuff. And of course, I agree with a lot of it. Oh, Sapir says that the stuff about moral cluelessness is relevant to the trolley problem stuff. I'm not seeing any explicit. So maybe I'll just do a poll to address it about the phenomenology with the trolley problem. So I think I'll put a poll in there. Truth Teller says, I think understanding comes with a certain phenomenology. It's like an aha moment, but I don't attribute it to sui generis appearance. I mean, I certainly can have like an emotional, like, now I get it. Like I've certainly done that before. But I don't know that I don't have intellectual seemings as far as I could tell. Truth Teller says it's more like a combination of surprise and satisfaction. Well, surprise, satisfaction, and adjusting my beliefs and maybe other stuff. Yeah. I have that. Can you explain your feeling of grasping? Who are you asking, Nathan? So, Faith Because of Reason says consciousness explained in assorted essays. So, what did you not like about Dennett's stuff? Did you not like the writing style? Did you not like the arguments? Did you not like the position? What was it that you didn't like? All right, people are getting a little immature in the chat. All right, I'm going to pop in and do a poll because I am curious about how people respond to this question. One moment. All right, it's not an ideal question because it really limits characters to like 100 characters, and that was actually exactly 100 characters. And the question is, do you have any distinctive phenomenology when you consider your reaction to the footbridge dilemma? Now, what I don't mean is that if you're presented with it, do you have the experience of having an emotional reaction like, that would be bad or something like that? What I mean is, do you have an intellectual phenomenology where when you're drawn to answering yes or no, I would push or I wouldn't push, you should push or you shouldn't push or something like that? Do you have an intellectual experience about what the truth of the answer to that question is? Faith Because of Reason says, I just approach the issue in a very different way than Dennett does. Okay. I mean, this is something maybe we could talk about sometime. I understand not approaching things in the way that he does. He uses a lot of story, like he'll give like his, it's hard to even get into them. But he uses like games and intuition pumps and a kind of like he'll describe a scenario or he'll describe some studies and then he'll leverage those to kind of he kind of builds this kind of intuition ramp where, hey, I want to get you to get in the mind space or the space to view things from this perspective I'm at. And so rather than present like a syllogism or an argument or something, he'll use various methods of trying to get you to flip your perspective, kind of like someone trying to get you to change how you're viewing a Necker cube. And so he writes in a style where he's trying to like shift your mindset. And I think people find that unappealing or not. It's not conventional, but I find it awesome. I really enjoy it. All right, so we'll keep going. I'll leave the poll up there for a while. Let's keep going with the video.
Something, an experience when you're like, I don't know, reflecting on rational intuition or something like that does seem kind of weird to me. Like it does seem like there are obviously experiences beyond just like the five senses or something. Like our inner lives are like much richer than just being prodded by like stimulus.
Yeah, right. So yeah, you obviously have experiences, other than outward observation. So, you think.
So they both just keep saying it's obvious, it's obvious, it's obvious. I'm not even sure what their position is. So I don't know what it is that they take to be obvious. So maybe if they cashed it out, I would say, yeah, that's obvious. It's obvious that there's like, I have an internal monologue. It's not like I think that like there's only sense experience and there's like nothing else going on with me cognitively. But the other stuff that is going on, very little of it I would describe as experiential. So like mental imagery seems experiential and it's not directly sensorial. So if you ask me to like picture an apple in my mind, there's something experiential about that act, but I'm not actually seeing anything. I'm like kind of quasi seeing, sort of, or at least it seems like I'm kind of seeing, kind of maybe. So there's something experiential-ish about that, but I don't know if I have the same phenomenology. I certainly am not reporting the same phenomenology as them. I would advise caution for someone saying it's obvious that there's experiences of this kind. Two words of caution. One is other people might have different experiences than you. And the second is that just because you're reporting experiences, its obviousness is not necessarily a good guide to whether things are as they seem. I think people can be quite mistaken about what their own experiences are like. And actually, Dan Dennett, of all people, provides a good example of this. You could look at a painting from a distance and you might think you could see like the characters in the foreground look highly detailed, and you see that there's a background and there's people walking in the distance, right? And if I showed you that image, you might look at that and go, the people in the background, there's people in the background walking around. But as you approach the painting, it becomes increasingly evident that some of the people in the background are like a beige blob and a red blob. And from a distance, you had the impression off in the periphery or off in the background from a distance that it was like a person walking on the beach with a red hat on or something like that. But then as you approach, you realize it's two blobs. And your brain is kind of doing something like person walking over here. It's giving you the impression that there's a person walking over there when really there is not a person walking over there. So that's the sort of thing that can happen with our visual field. And this doesn't just apply to paintings. If you look straight ahead of you at a particular object and you then ask people, does it appear to you that things outside where your focus is are highly detailed and like full color image? People will report, yeah, of course. Yeah, it seems like my whole visual field it's fully colorful, it's wholly detailed. No, it's not. So nope, things are blurry. Things are not detailed. They're not as colorful as you think they are in the periphery of your vision. You're incorrect about what your visual experience looks like. Now, I'm assuming, for people that would report things this way, which is probably most people, because this has to do with rather rudimentary features of the way that eyes work. So maybe there's something wrong with your visual cognition, something, abnormal with your eyes or your visual cognition. But generally speaking, this is how most people are going to experience things. And the way that things seem to them, they're wrong. They are not that way. So people can be and are frequently incorrect about rather basic features of their sense experience. If we can be incorrect about that, I see it as not much of a stretch to think that people could be incorrect about other aspects of their experience. I'm getting a ton of comments here. I have to check on something real quick, and I'll be right back in a second. It really will just be a second. All right, I am back. Okay, so, oh man, I love this, all these comments. Okay, let's have a look in here and see if there's anything good to comment on. So Pierce says there's more than the five senses anyway. I thought that's uncontroversial. Yeah, you're going to have like proprioception and other sorts of things. People talking to each other. That's great. Smash like Lance is independent. Lance Independent is your place for academic, interesting conversations to satisfy the curiosity. Please subscribe. Appreciate the hype. Yeah, I mean, it's something you're probably supposed to do, like tell people to like a video. I don't want to do all that plugging, so let people in the chat do it. Let's keep going. Talking to each other. Yeah, you can at me if you want to ask me questions or say stuff that you want me to comment on if you're talking to each other, because I got to filter through a lot of comments. It's more and more and more. I used to just have 5-10 people in my streams, and now I'm getting about 40, which is great, but it is hard to keep up with. All right, all right. Cool. Okay, mostly people talking to each other. That's great. Let's keep going with the video.
Think about mathematical principles, and frequently you will have the sense of just seeing that it's true, but not seeing with your eyes, but seeing with your intellect or something like that.
Yeah, again, I don't know what he means. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but seeing with your mind, I don't see with my mind. I don't know what.
And it's a little bit weird. I think it's a little bit weird if you think, oh, those don't count for anything. Like you should just ignore those. And we only count the outward observation experiences. Like, why would we not?
Well, it's not that I wouldn't count my seeing that something is a prime number or some mathematical solution. It's that I just wouldn't describe it as seeing, like other than in a like a non-literal metaphorical sense. So it's not that I would say we shouldn't count these experiences. It's that I don't think those are experiences.
Not count also the intuitive experiences where you see that it's obviously true or something.
Yeah, we were talking about naturalism, which holds that there are these stance-independent, objective, moral facts, but they're reducible to.
Here comes the meta-ethics. Faith, because of reason, asks Lance, do you imagine things? I think this would be an example of seeing with your mind. Do you mean like imagine what? So I can imagine, like when I'm reading a book, I imagine like a fiction book. Like I imagine characters like battling it out and that kind of stuff. So there's a kind of visual thing going on. But note in that case that I'm imagining like visual stuff. I also have an internal monologue, so I think in words. So that's another type of experience I have. So I don't know if you were here earlier, but I don't think all my experiences have to be this sort of direct perception of things in the external world. There are experiential aspects to imagining. But there's no special experience I have of like seeing truth. So yeah, faith, because yes, visual imagining. Yeah, I already talked about that, but yes, to address your question.
We only count the outward observation experiences. Like, why would we not count also the intuitive experiences where something makes sense to you and you seem to see that it's obviously true or something?
Yeah, we were talking about naturalism, which holds that there are these stance-independent, objective, moral facts, but they're reducible to descriptive claims. And then the non-naturalist thinks that these evaluative truths are not reducible to descriptive truths. And in addition to that metaphysical difference, there's also this like epistemic difference, where naturalists tend to be more like empirically minded and non-naturalists tend to be more rationalist and so on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so like, I mean, as you were saying, you could kind of see why this would be the case. I mean, what's the motivation for saying that moral facts are reducible in the first place? Like a large part of the motivation is empiricism. So they're like, yeah, no, how could we possibly know moral truths on the basis of observation? Because like moral truths don't look like anything. They don't have a color or shape or whatever, like, and they don't impinge on your sense organs. So, okay, so like the only way to make it so that it sounds somewhat plausible that it could be empirical is to say, well, it's really reducible to the descriptive facts.
So how does that compare to like the is-ought gap? Like everyone's heard about, the gap between is and ought. And to me, it sounds like moral naturalists just think that the is-ought gap is like illusory or can be closed, and moral non-naturalists think that it can't be closed. But I think I heard somewhere that you don't think that's exactly right. Like the is-ought gap is not like a good way to distinguish moral naturalists and moral non-naturalists.
I mean, so like there's two versions of naturalism. Analytic naturalism and synthetic naturalism. So the analytic naturalists think that you can actually explain the meaning of moral terms using non-moral terms. And like that would imply that you can bridge the is-ought gap, right? So like, so here's a simple analytic naturalist view, like good means causes pleasure or something. So, okay, and then like, and that's actually what it means. So then this would be a valid inference, X causes pleasure, therefore X is good. And so that bridges the is-ought gap. So, okay, but that I think that view was refuted by G.E. Moore. Not everyone agrees with that, but anyway, like I think G.E. Moore refuted that, and most naturalists agree actually that G.E. Moore was right. Good doesn't just mean causes pleasure or anything else that doesn't contain evaluative terms. However, it is possible to have a reductionist theory in which you don't make claims about meaning. Okay, so. Like this is a reductionist theory. Red is a certain range of wavelengths of light, but that's not what the word red means. Like there are plenty of people who understand the word red and don't know anything about wavelengths of light. When you teach a child what red is, like you don't tell the child about wavelengths of light. So it looks like that's not the meaning, but that is a correct theoretical explanation of the property. Okay, so like the synthetic naturalists think, yeah, you can give a correct theoretical explanation of the nature of goodness or rightness or whatever, even though you can't explain the meaning of the word. And G.E. Moore's arguments don't refute that. And I agree with that. He didn't refute that view, right?
Yeah, so I agree with everything he's saying here, and I think he did a pretty good job of explaining it as well. So you do have, I know Nathan is mocking this. Nathan is like, Mike loves Cunning's versions, but there is like a legitimate distinction here, and like Moore's objections are only going to apply to analytic naturalism; they're not going to apply to synthetic naturalism. I did have a really big discussion on synthetic naturalism a long time ago, before I had a blog or a YouTube channel or anything. I wish I could go dig it up and find it and share that, because I critiqued a particular synthetic naturalist account, and I haven't done that on my blog or my YouTube channel, so that would be an interesting thing to do.
So there's this distinction between analytic and synthetic naturalists sounds kind of similar to the distinction between a priori physicalism and a posteriori physicalism, where the a posteriori physicalists at least admit that there's like a conceptual like epistemic gap, like they admit there's something there with a hard problem. Like, yeah, you can conceive of like zombies or like qualia inversion.
Again, it's the language of admitting. There's something presumptuous about it. I don't like this phrasing.
Or something like that. But whereas the a priori physicalists are like, no, there's not even a conceptual dualism that's acceptable. But yeah, it kind of sounds like something similar with the analytic and synthetic naturalists. So like analytic naturalists literally like deny the is-ought gap or say it's an illusion, whereas like the synthetic naturalists would at least admit that there is like an epistemic is-ought gap. Like they're making this distinction between like the semantics of moral language and like, the actual, I don't know, like metaphysics of moral claims.
Moral terms, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems right. Like in the philosophy of mind, there are these people who made claims about, I guess, about the meanings of psychological vocabulary, right? Like, pain just refers to a certain disposition to behave in a certain way, right? And so, like, that's like the analytic naturalists, and obviously false. Like what you would want to have a synthetic reductionist view in philosophy of mind, like it's an it's a synthetic and empirical fact that the mind is the brain or something like that.
Right.
Now, I don't know how many people actually have that view. My impression is that the great majority of people in philosophy of mind are they're analytic functionalists. Like they think mental state terms can just be analyzed conceptually as functional kinds. So like pain is just a state with certain kinds of causal connections to other mental states and, stimuli in the environment, right? And also behavior.
I think that, I think there's a very loud minority of like a priori physicalists, but I think they are the minority. Like I think the vast majority of physicalists are a posteriori physicalists.
I really don't like this terminology. So I would fall in this camp that's called like something similar to an a priori physicalist, but I'm not a physicalist, and I don't think that I think P zombies are inconceivable. I think that there is no meaningful conception of phenomenal consciousness. You can hold those views without being a physicalist and without thinking that it's like an a priori matter. You could think that it's an empirical matter, that certain sorts of concepts are not meaningful. For me, that's downstream of my commitments to empiricism and pragmatism. It's not something that I think is like an a priori truth that I figure out like from pure reason. So why use that term? Maybe it's because that covers the vast majority of people that do hold these views, but I doubt it. I mean, there's got to be some reason for the history behind this, but it doesn't seem like a well-chosen name for the position. There was something someone said in here. Faith Because of Reason said, Lance, did you watch Emerson's reply to his critics on the moral argument? You were mentioned, I believe. I probably watched part of that. I don't know if I watched all of it. I would be surprised if he mentioned me. I'm not a big player in these disputes, so why would I be mentioned? But I could go look that up. Can you send me a link to it? And then I could maybe, now I want to know where it is. Let me look it up. All right, I already looked it up. We could check the transcript. Is it the one from a year ago, The Collapse of the Moral Argument for God? I'll assume so. Let's see if it's got a transcript. It does. Let's see if I'm mentioned. I didn't find any reference to me in the transcript. So maybe you know better than me. I don't know. Oh, his more recent video responding to criticisms of that video. I see. Okay, yeah, send me a link or something. Send me a message. You could send it on Facebook. I'll see it there. All right, let's keep going.
I know we have
I think
some philosophers of mind in here.
I can't remember if I think that because of the Phil paper survey or because some physicalists told me that, but it seems like I hear it all the time from physicalists, but I don't know.
No, I think they're probably answering your question deceptively. So they're probably answering the question the way that they think is true, but is not answering what you wanted. So because I think the majority of people in philosophy of mind are like analytic functionalists, like I said, like they think it's an analytic truth that you have a certain mental state if and only if you have a certain functional state. But they think that it's an empirical fact that physical states are what in fact satisfy those functional kinds. So, right. So they would say, oh, no, I'm not saying that, that mental states are necessarily physical, because there could have been some non-physical thing, characteristics, right? And then you would have had mental states.
So just to return to the anti-realists though, obviously there are like many subdivisions, like anti-realists and realists have like, tons of disagreements, but there are these three broad positions that you can fall into as an anti-realist, and, possibly some combination of them, but still there are like these three broad options where, if you think that moral statements are like not even expressing propositions, like they're not even making claims about the world, you're not talking about beliefs that people have, then you're some kind of non-cognitivist or expressivist. Like a really crude form of it is just like, yay, not stealing, and like boo, murder,
Yeah.
And then so those are not like cognitively meaningful propositions. They're just like, yay. And then there's subjectivism, which thinks that no, these are cognitively meaningful propositions. It's just that they constitutively depend on observers or an observer, or groups of observers. And then you've got, so they're not objective, but then you've got like error theorists / nihilists who think like, no, these are cognitively meaningful propositions, and they're not like subjective in the sense that the subjectivists think. So people are trying to make these statements of fact, and they're all just wrong. Like there are no such properties. There are no objective moral properties. Like these are just things that we made up. Maybe they can be explained through like evolutionary history or something, but there are no such objective moral properties.
Yeah, Nathan, you're drawing attention to this term cognitively meaningful, which might sound a little strange. I think he just means propositional, and I don't see anything wrong with that.
So it's actually
I got distracted.
and they're not like subjective in the sense that the subjectivists think. So people are trying to make these statements of fact, and they're all just wrong. Like there are no such properties. There are no objective moral properties. Like these are just things that we made up. Maybe they can be explained through like evolutionary history or something, but there are no such objective moral properties. So it's actually not true that it's like wrong to torture babies for fun. The Holocaust wasn't bad in like any real sense. It was just, well, I'm starting to get into, it was a
thing that most people didn't like.
Yeah, some people really liked it. Some other people thought it was not good. And fortunately, the people who happened to prefer the not killing Jews ice cream, prevailed. But the people who liked the killing Jews ice cream, they lost, thankfully. But
thankfully to us. But there's no fact about who was right. There's no being right, or actually they were both wrong. Right? The Nazis thought that it was good to kill Jews, and then the Allies thought that it was bad. But they were both mistaken. It was neither good nor bad. But we didn't like it, so we're happy. We're happy that we beat them because we didn't like them.
Right. So yeah, some people,
All right. So I found the part where I'm mentioned in a recent video. This looks like it was from a couple months ago. I didn't know that I was mentioned, so we're going to switch over to that quickly to have a look, and then we'll come back to this. Well, it's already been an hour, so maybe I'll have to cut it short at some point, but I'm good to keep going. Give me one moment. All right, here we are. Let's, audio's off. Let's continue with it. It looks like I'm mentioned right here, so I'll take it back about 10 seconds. Okay.
The idea that like non-theistic moral realism is necessarily false.
Yeah. We're going to be talking about somebody. I already said it on Twitter anyway. We'll be discussing the views of Lance Bush. So we're going to discuss what Chris would call quietism.
Yeah, it's quietism about a lot of things. Like thought.
For a quietist, he never shuts the fuck up.
More properties.
Did he say for a quietist, he never shuts the fuck up? That's a good one. Yeah, I like that. I've heard it before. Like people say that kind of thing, but it is a good one.
Sarah.
All right, so let's go to our next
I don't understand why
the quietest always the ones who never shut the fuck up.
timestamp here, which is 12 minutes and 29 seconds. Right there. Let's go there. 21 seconds.
Expressed by them are in fact true, and straightforwardly so, in the way ordinary descriptive propositions are straightforwardly true. That's the core of moral realism. At least some positive ethical propositions are straightforwardly true. So consider two objective but descriptive facts. First, the Earth is not flat. It's an oblate spheroid. Second, 7 is greater than 2. They're both non-evaluative facts that obtain regardless of what anyone thinks about them, whether they want them to be true, etc. We know about those quite differently, and in some sense, they seem like different kinds of facts altogether, even though they're both objectively true. The Earth is an oblate spheroid, and 7 is greater than 2. And as you can probably guess, I'm trying to establish a precedent. A, objective facts can fall into different categories. For example, they're not all about the physical world or some such. And B, we can know about objective facts through very different means. The way that we know 7 is greater than 2 is not the same as the way we know that the Earth is an oblate spheroid. He's literally doing on mentioning knowledge or intuition or making judgments. He's like, moral ontology and epistemology, you gotta separate those. This is like the dumbest.
I thought they were going to review something. Didn't they say they're going to review something I had to say? Where does this occur? I mean, all I got was a reference to me in a joke, but I had thought that they had said at the start of that they're going to discuss my views at some point. Where do they do that?
Non-theistic moral realism is necessarily false.
Yeah. We're going to be talking about somebody. I already said it on Twitter anyway. We'll be discussing the views of Lance Bush. So
We'll be discussing the views of Lance Bush. Okay. So where do they do that? We'll go back to this. I'm going to have a quick look to see if they talk about my views at some point. Where do they do this? Yeah, I'm checking the transcript and I don't see any other reference to me at any point. It's a 3.5-hour video. David, do you know if they end up talking about my views at some point? Because that would be a fun thing to review. A review of especially if it was a review video I did, and then they're reviewing that, and then I'm reviewing their review of my review. I see. David says, I think they may have been saying that it was something they would do at a future time. That'd be great. They're also, I don't know who, do you know who that other person is? I don't know who the other person is. There, of course, I would encourage them to review my stuff without me there so they could be as critical as they want. But they're also welcome to come have a conversation with me on my channel or anybody else's channel. I'd be happy to talk to them. Yeah, and you said, David, I think that Emerson seems very irritated by me. I took those to be jokes. Maybe they're motivated by some type of irritation with me. I don't know. I thought they were pretty good jokes. Like, for a quietist, he never shuts the fuck up. That's pretty good. So I mean, it like really plays on the meaning of the term that I use. So I don't mind that. Now, if he were serious, I would have some concerns, but that doesn't sound serious. I don't know. I do get the impression that he isn't particularly interested in talking to me. I don't know why that is. I've never been told, but I'd be happy to talk to him. I don't have any personal issue. I mean, look, I've seen his videos and other stuff. I think he does good videos. I think sound quality is good. I know I said that before, but I do envy people that put their videos together better than I do. I legitimately am envious of that. But also I think that the content, like criticizing apologists, I've seen his stuff on that. I think it's good. So like we disagree on meta ethics. It doesn't mean we disagree on other stuff. I think some of his other stuff is good. Some of it I disagree with. Some of it I agree with. Some of it I think is good. Some of it I think is not as good. But there's not any general like, that channel sucks. I don't have that attitude at all. Like I'm going to disagree on the panpsychism and consciousness stuff too. But you know, like take a look, for instance, at my conversation with Derek McAllister. There are people that are on the opposite side of the philosophical aisle as me, and I at least think that we get along just fine. And I would like that to be the general vibe of the online philosophy community, I guess you could say, is for people to get along with one another. I do know that people often express contempt or animus towards Dan Dennett, towards moral anti-realists. And I do think this is a two-way street. I think that people on my side, including myself, sometimes express contempt or hostility back. I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think it helps any of us. And I'll say this, and then I'll go right back into it, because I'm a human being. I get annoyed by people. I get pissed off by people. So I'm going to keep doing it too. And I can only hope that we all can rise above it. Certainly some people already are. Some people are very chill about their views. What can I say? All right. So back to the original video.
Some anti-realists, I think, might be slightly upset at the way that we're, talking about like their position. But like, it's difficult because when you just accurately describe their view, it sounds like you're strawmanning them, because like their belief.
It doesn't, though. I mean, it might. Well, I mean, I can't talk for how things seem to handle.
Talking about like their position, but like it's difficult because when you just accurately describe their view, it sounds like you're strawmanning them, because
it may sound like you're strawmanning them to you. It doesn't to me. So like I don't have a huge issue with people having a chuckle at the expense of someone with an opposing philosophical view. But, if they're like, oh, error theorists don't think anything is wrong. They don't think torturing babies is wrong at all. If the idea is that sounds like a caricature, it sounds like a straw man, but it's really not. Why does it sound like a straw man to you? Why does it sound like a caricature to you? Is it possible that you are failing to disentangle the pragmatic associations that you would have in an ordinary circumstance with a person saying it's not wrong to torture babies. Think about this context, and I'm going to bring up the SEP entry on this. But imagine you run into a person on the street and you say to them, you like, hi, and you're talking to them and you're, I don't know, walking down the street. Hey, where are you headed? And then the person turns to you and they say, it's not wrong to torture babies just for fun. That's a terrifying person. That's a person that probably tortures babies or is really cool with the idea of torturing babies. That's a terrifying person. Now, when that person says it's not wrong to torture babies for fun, that is going to sound like a first order normative claim. And the pragmatic implication of it's not wrong to X is it's permissible, it's morally permissible to X. In ordinary language, that's how that would be interpreted. Kind of like if somebody said, oh, that music is not bad. They're implying not simply that they have no stance at all. It's not good, it's not bad, because terms like good and bad don't apply to our evaluation of music. They're implying like if you were rating the music on a scale of 1 to 10, and let's say below a 3 is bad, they're like, it's not a 3 or lower. And so that also pragmatically implies it's not like a 7, 8, 9, or 10. So it's in the middle zone. It's not bad. It's not great. It's mediocre music. That's what that would imply. It's implying an actual evaluation. Likewise, when a person says, it's not wrong to torture babies for fun, the person is saying something like, I'm kind of cool with doing that. That's what they're suggesting. They're making a first order normative claim, and that's providing information about that person's character, their intentions, their attitude, their values, what kind of person they are. Now, flip it over to an academic context where a person says, hey, I have the same attitudes as you. I think we should stop all these people torturing babies. I ran into this guy in the street and he turned to me and he said, it's okay to torture babies just for fun. And I called the police and I got him arrested and he's not torturing babies anymore. So the error theorist would be saying all this, right? And then the error theorist can go on and say, look, but technically my view is that everyday moral language commits one to the existence of objective moral properties, but there are no objective moral properties. So when people go around saying things like it's wrong to torture babies for fun, what they mean is it's objectively wrong to torture babies for fun. Now, nothing is objectively wrong. So technically what they're saying is false. Now, in that context, that person would be saying, so someone goes, so you don't think it's wrong to torture babies for fun? And they go, no, I don't think it's wrong to torture babies for fun. Now, in that context, is that a scary baby torturer person? No, it's a different context. It's very clear in that context that the reason why they don't think it's wrong is because they don't think it's objectively wrong. That tells you nothing about their first order normative standards or attitudes. So someone said, okay, well, let's say we spoke like a relativist for a moment. Would you say it's wrong relative to your values? Like wrong, not in the sense, the objective sense, but wrong in the sense of it being inconsistent with your values. The error theorist would almost certainly say, yes, of course. I just finished saying that myself. So that shows you that in everyday contexts, there are pragmatic features of what we mean when we say things like it's not wrong to torture babies for fun, and that a person, an error theorist saying this in a philosophical context does not mean that. And so I think a lot of the critics that say, oh, the view sounds ridiculous, the view sounds preposterous, are failing to distinguish the two contexts. In academic philosophy, when you're doing the sentence analysis and you're offering a semantic thesis disassociates and distills away all of the pragmatic implicatures and pragmatic features that would be associated with that language in its everyday uses. You're setting aside the pragmatics and you're distilling just the semantics. But it looks like the critics of views like this are, at least this is what I suspect, are failing to do that. They're literally just failing to understand what the error theorist says and what the error theorist means and what the error theorist is implying. It's like they can't dissociate the pragmatic features. They continue to heap them onto the error theorist, and they go, oh, well, the error theorist thinks it's not wrong to torture babies for fun. The horror, the outrage. Where's the horror? Where's the outrage? Look, when the error theorist says it's not wrong to torture babies for fun, the person could be literally in the act of like tying up baby torturers, and they could be known as Saint Baby Torture Stopper, right? And the only thing they do in their life is they go around hunting down baby torturers, and they try to stop them. It's all they care about. They care about it. They could be the most righteous person in the world. They care about it much more than you. They just don't think it's objectively wrong, but they're more opposed to it than you are. They're passionately opposed to it. Okay. So that could be the error theorist. That person is more against baby torture than you. Now, it's ridiculous to say to that person, oh, so you don't think it's wrong to torture babies. What the fuck do you mean? What the fuck do you mean when you say that? Because all they're saying is, I don't think it's a case that it's a stance-independent fact that it's wrong to torture babies such that you have a reason to do so independent of your goal, standards, or values. Nevertheless, in spite of that fact, I, as an error theorist, am as or more against it than you. What concerns do you have about that person? Is the concern, oh, they're not a realist? How preposterous. So is the like the view sounds ridiculous because they're not a realist? Because that's the only thing that they're really committed to when they say it's not wrong to torture babies. That's simply an implication of them, the conjunction of the semantic thesis and the metaphysical thesis. That's just an entailment of the view that conditional on what's meant by it's wrong to torture babies, it being it stands independently wrong to torture babies. They don't think anything stands independently wrong, so they don't think that it's wrong in that sense. That tells you absolutely nothing about their attitudes, disposition, character, or behavior. And yet, I think critics are implying, whether they intend for it or not, that this is the case, that the error theorist is somehow has horrific commitments or attitudes or dispositions. If anything, error theorists, I mean, like, ask a realist this. Ask a realist. Suppose you became convinced that moral realism is not true. What would you think about baby torture? Would you be okay with it? Would you become an evil person with a preposterous worldview? What would be preposterous about it? And often the preposterousness, there's a valence to it, as though there's something horrific or awful about the person that would say something so horrifying. Look, if there's no objective moral facts, I'm sorry, realists, tough shit. That's how reality is. We still got to live here. And there's still people that would want to torture babies. I don't know about you. I still want to stop them. Do you? Are you with me? Or are you the one that's going to go, oh, well, if it's not objectively wrong, then who gives a shit? Go ahead and torture babies. Because if you're that person and I'm not, which one of us is the fucked up one, huh? Which one of us? It's not me. So for realists that have this attitude, what the hell? They need an external list of rules to tell them they shouldn't torture babies? I don't need that list. So I don't know where moral realists get on this fucking self-righteous high horse acting like us anti-realists are the shitty ones. We're not. And I'm sick of this shit. And I'm sick of the smug attitude that so many realists have, acting like we anti-realists have preposterous, like as if the view is evil. If it's just an intellectual issue, it's just ridiculous. Why is it ridiculous to be an anti-realist? Why specifically? Can you say something other than your personal feeling of incredulity or like it's just so counterintuitive? I don't find it counterintuitive. I don't care about realist intuitions on the matter. Realists have never shown me any indication that their intuitions are any better than mine, any better at tracking truths than mine. So when they say these sorts of things, what exactly are they saying? Come out and say what you mean. What is preposterous about what the error theorist is saying? Because if all you have is hey, error theorists aren't realists, that's preposterous, then what kind of weird, pointless, vacuous circular loop are you going into? And if that's not what you mean, if you mean there's more to it, what more to it is there? Because it's certainly not that error theorists are more okay with baby torture, because they're not. So if there's more to it, what is there more to it? If there's not more to it, then you might as well go around, like this would be like a theist saying, oh my God, atheists? You know why atheism is preposterous? Atheists think God doesn't exist, but God clearly does exist. How ridiculous. They're denying the fact that God exists. Theism is true. So atheism is clearly preposterous because God exists. It's just like that. If the only substance to the objection is that the error theorist isn't a realist, but that's not what they say. They focus on the sentences. And so there's something weird about that. If you just thought it was preposterous that error theorists don't think that there are objective moral truths, why wouldn't you just say that? Why focus on the sentences? Do you think it's preposterous that it would be true that there's no objective moral facts? If so, why? There's something very weird about this. Yeah, something real weird about this. Okay, so I don't know.
Because like their beliefs are kind of absurd, but they don't literally go around saying like the Holocaust wasn't bad or like, oh, Hitler wasn't evil.
They might in the right contexts, but it would be wise not to in most contexts. I said I was going to show the SAP entry on this, so let me find it. Because I'm not the only one that has made this point. This is a point Richard Joyce has made. Let me find it. Oh my God. Yep, here it is. Found it. Great. All right. So I'll just read this off. To be an error theorist about unicorns does not mean that every assertion involving the word, quote, unicorn is false. There would be no error, for example, in asserting unicorns do not exist. The ancient Greeks believed that unicorns lived in India, or my dog is not a unicorn. What is distinctive about these three sentences is that one would not, in asserting them, be committing oneself to the existence of unicorns. It would be rather troubling if this were not true of the first in particular. Similarly, the moral error theorist may allow that the following are true. Moral wrongness does not exist. Augustine believed that stealing pears was wrong, and stealing is not morally wrong. The last example, notice that, stealing is not morally wrong. The last example, quote, stealing is not morally wrong, calls for an extra comment. In ordinary conversation, where presumably the possibility of moral error theory is not considered a live option, someone who claims that X is not wrong would be taken to be implying that X is morally good or at least morally permissible. And if, quote, X denotes something awful like torturing innocent people, then this can be used to make the error theorist look awful. But when we are doing metaethics and the possibility of moral error theory is on the table, then this ordinary implication breaks down. The error theorist doesn't think that torturing innocent people is morally wrong, but doesn't think that it is morally good or morally permissible either. It is important that criticisms of the moral error theorist do not trade on equivocating between the implications that hold in ordinary contexts and the implications that hold in metaethical contexts. Now, this is great from Joyce, but I don't think it goes far enough, because he says here, the error theorist doesn't think that torturing people is morally wrong, but they don't think it's morally good or morally permissible either. Now, that to a realist may not be good enough. So the error theorist doesn't think it's wrong, right, nothing. That could still leave one with the impression that the error theorist is, quote unquote, okay with torture, that they would be less opposed to it than the realist. And that also does not follow. So what advantage do realists have over anti-realists? I mean, they may claim to be have an intellectual advantage. They may claim to be correct, but much of the opposition to error theory seems to have this contempt for the view as though it implies something unsavory, something disgusting, repugnant, evil, awful. But where is that in one's description of the commitments of error theory? The error theorist is simply committed to a descriptive claim about the meaning of ordinary moral claims and a metaphysical claim about the existence of objective moral truths. This has absolutely nothing to do with their character, their disposition, or their actions. So I don't know why realists harp on this so much, as if they have uncovered the perfidious nature, the nasty, wicked nature of error theorists, and they just haven't. Let's see. Back to the original.
Or, they don't literally, if you
let's take this back a little bit.
the way that we're, talking about their position, but it's difficult because when you just accurately describe their view, it sounds like you're straw manning them, because their beliefs are kind of absurd. But they don't literally go around saying the Holocaust wasn't bad, or oh, Hitler wasn't evil, or they don't literally, if you say, hey, are you pro Hitler, they'll be like, no, he was bad, the Holocaust.
So this is such a strange way to phrase things. They don't literally go around saying that. Well, it's going to depend on the context in which you're asking them, if whether it's bad or not. So saying baby torture isn't bad is a very different thing from saying I'm not anti-baby torture or something like that. A person can say, yeah, look, baby torture isn't bad in the literal realist sense, but I don't approve of it. I'm opposed to it. So this is not a win for critics of error theorists. Error theorists understand that there are pragmatic implications to what they say in everyday contexts, and it would be wise for them to avoid speaking in ways that would actually be misleading. It would be misleading for an error theorist to say, yeah, I don't think baby torture is wrong. In most contexts, it would give actually a false impression about what their commitments are. Are people do we just forget about pragmatics? This matters. So, philosophers themselves are supposed to be the ones that are aware of and are experts at distinguishing the semantic core of these sorts of statements, where you distill away the pragmatic features. But then, do they forget about that? when they talk about this sort of stuff.
Holocaust was bad. It was wrong to do that. But then, in like the philosophy classroom, they say the opposite thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not saying the opposite thing. They are drawing a distinction between scenarios in which the pragmatic implications of Sorry, I think I froze up there. They're drawing a distinction between instances in which the pragmatic features of what they're saying are on the table and ones in which they're supposed to not be on the table. So it's not wrong to torture babies, stated by an error theorist in a classroom where you're discussing meta-ethics, literally means something different than it's not wrong to torture babies uttered on the street in many contexts. In the first case, the person is saying this. It is not the case that it is stance-independently wrong to torture babies. In the second case, the person may be saying something like, it's permissible or I approve of baby torture. Those mean different things. So they are, like, in a certain sense, like, grammatically, in one case they're saying baby torture is wrong, and in the other case they're saying baby torture is not wrong. But there's no inconsistency in their actual philosophical commitments, their views, their attitudes, or anything like that. So I think Emerson is absolutely right here to draw attention to this apparent tension and potential inconsistency in the way that an error theorist is inclined to speak. But there's a perfectly good explanation for it, and it's a perfectly innocent and understandable explanation.
And something they'll say is that our moral statements don't really imply like a factual status, or like that they don't imply that these judgments are true. So like they feel like they have no issue with saying like, oh, well, the Holocaust was wrong, but there's nothing wrong with gay marriage, and stealing is wrong, but this other thing is totally fine, and this other action is good, and so on and so forth. And they're just like, well, look, I don't think that it is a fact that the Holocaust was wrong. Like I would never say that's completely crazy. Like I would never say it's true that the Holocaust was wrong. That's completely different from saying the Holocaust was wrong. So they're trying to draw this like extremely tenuous distinction between like the Holocaust was wrong, which is totally fine, and then it's true that the Holocaust was wrong, or it is a fact.
They might be totally fine saying it's true that the Holocaust is wrong. I don't know what error theorist he's talking about. Maybe he's read something from an error theorist somewhere. We don't have sources in this, so I don't know if anybody actually talks this way. If he wants to talk to an error theorist, I mean, he could talk to Matt Lutz. Maybe Matt Lutz would be willing to talk to him. I think that would be an interesting conversation. So I would encourage Emerson, hey, you don't want to talk to me, talk to Matt Lutz. Matt Lutz is an error theorist. I think that'd be a great conversation. And you could run these questions by him and ask him, what would you say in an academic conference or on the street? Would you say it's true that the Holocaust is wrong? Or would you just say the Holocaust is wrong? What would you say in these situations? And I'm curious I don't actually know what his answers would be. I mean, keep in mind, I'm not an error theorist, but there's no way for me to know. He might be accurately describing what some error theorists would say. There's no way for me to know, like right now. We could check with some error theorists and see what they would say. If you're an error theorist in the chat, you could say what you would say in these different situations.
That the Holocaust is wrong, but it seems like that's just implied. Like whenever you make any statement about anything, it's implied that you think it's true. Like unless it's obviously subjective, but like when you're making statements like that, of that form,
that he might just be right about this, but then I question whether error theorists would really speak this way.
It just seems implied that you're saying, and it's a fact that this is true. It's not like you say, oh well, the Holocaust is wrong. You say, is that true? It's like, no, it's completely false. Like
imagine me saying, it's raining outside, but that's not true. I'm not saying it's.
I mean, they again without. Maybe they're accurately describing things actual error theorists have said, but if not, then they might be caricaturing error theorists a bit.
True that it's raining, but it's raining. I'm not saying it's a fact that it's raining. Like that would be very strange. Okay, but I mean, it may be that you're talking to people who aren't sure what form of anti-realism they're trying to advance, right? So, like that thing makes sense if you're a non-cognitivist. You're like, yeah, it's not true because this isn't an assertion, right? I'm not saying it's true that hooray for the Broncos, because that doesn't make sense. I'm just saying hooray for the Broncos. I don't think it makes sense for the nihilists. It's not cool to say P, but that's false, right? And their view is that the moral statements are false. So it's not cool to say them. It's not appropriate. Then, if you're a subjectivist, then I think you should say, make the moral statements and you should say they're true, right? Like, no, it's true that murder is wrong. It's true that the Holocaust was bad because it's true that we disapprove of it. What's your problem? Right? Okay, but then they would also have to say, yeah, but like, I mean, it's true for us, but of course, if you were in Nazi Germany, then for you, the Holocaust would be good.
Right. It's the killing Jews ice cream versus the not killing Jews ice cream. People feel different ways about it. Who's to say?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'm just reporting how I feel about it. I feel bad about it. Other people, I don't like it. Other people like it. But anyway, but that's true. It's a fact. It's not objective. It's a subjective fact. But
yeah. So I mean, it sounds like you agree that like torturing a child is wrong versus it's true that torturing a child is wrong. Like that is. These are apparently very different, according to some of the anti-realists I'm talking to. There's a vast chasm between these two things, but it seems like saying torturing a child is wrong is the same thing as it's true that torturing a child is wrong. It seems kind of implied.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, it could be different if you're a non-cognitivist, right? And you think that these aren't truth claims in the first place, right? But yeah, I mean, like when you first mention nihilism, people might wonder, like, well, why would anybody hold this view? Like, why would somebody say, no, the Holocaust wasn't bad? Like, what's the argument for that other than being a Nazi, right? Which they're not, because they don't think it was good either, right? So anyway, like, why would somebody hold that view? Well, basically, they were convinced by the realists' arguments against the other two forms of anti-realism, right? So like, if you think about the arguments against non-cognitivism, like there are really strong arguments that moral statements are intended to express propositions. They're not just supposed to be expressions of emotion.
This might be true of some error theorists. I don't know. I mean, you would have to ask them. But it's not just going to be that they're convinced that the case for non-cognitivism and subjectivism is not very good. There's going to be more to their lack of being convinced than that, because that's largely going to center on semantic considerations. An error theorist is also going to have metaphysical commitments as well.
And like as a matter of, in fact, the conventions of English, right? Like trying to correctly describe how English works, murder is wrong is not an expressive statement; it is an assertion. And there are linguistic tests that show that. Okay, and so like the nihilists hear those arguments and they're convinced because they're good arguments, right? But then also they're good arguments that the truth of a moral statement doesn't depend on the attitudes of observers. So you say, okay, well, like, if you're living in a society, to go back to the Nazi example, if you're living in a society where your society approves of sending Jews to concentration camps, does that mean you should do that, right? Or if you yourself are also a Nazi when you're in that society, right? So, whether you think that it depends on the attitudes of you personally or the society, then the view would imply, oh, so then you should help send the Jews to the concentration camps. Okay, and that seems wrong. And moreover, that's not the way moral language works. Like in this whole moral talk game, right? It's not like one of the principles just based on the meaning of wrong, that something is not wrong as long as enough people approve of it, right? So anyway, okay, so the nihilists hear this and they're like, oh yeah, that's right. Like it's not, so it is supposed to assert matters of fact, and they're not supposed to be dependent on our attitudes. So moral statements are supposed to be making assertions of objective fact. But then the nihilists are like, yeah, but there aren't any objective value facts. So it has to be that all of the statements are false. And so then that's where you get to, well, murder isn't wrong. Because murder is wrong implies that wrongness exists objectively, but it doesn't, so it's false, right? Like, okay, but it seems kind of crazy.
Yeah, and
yeah, I don't see the value in remarks like this. Seems kind of crazy. And and Emerson earlier says it's absurd. Look, I think moral realism is absurd, but I mean, if that's about the substance of what you could say about a view, it's what am I supposed to do with that? So you personally think that the view seems crazy. If you say that, I'd like to know why. Why does it seem crazy? Is it just that it seeming crazy is because it conflicts with your intuitions? Like, what is there more to it than that? There just seems crazy. There just seems to be something to me that lacks depth in these kinds of remarks. It just seems like sneer language, and I would want more from critics of error theory than that. And I'm sure that they have more, but I feel like it adds negative value to these conversations to describe one's opposition in this way, to just casually, it seems crazy. If I consider how I addressed the concerns about the characterization of error theory earlier, is I went into a discussion about pragmatics. I looked up an SEP source to show that an error theorist, Richard Joyce, expresses a somewhat similar view to me. I say a bit more about why I feel that way and why I think that way. I offer a possible hypothesis on what sort of mistake I think that critics of error theory might be making. That's what I would like to see from critics of anti-realist positions like error theory. Substantive critiques, not just that's absurd, that's crazy, that's counterintuitive, that's counterintuitive, that's counterintuitive. Is that all you got? I mean, if you got more, please present it. I mean, it would give me something to do, is to look at your criticisms.
And they are aware that it sounds crazy, so they sometimes attempt to like rephrase moral statements, and I think that's why they would get annoyed with some of the stuff I was saying earlier, like, "Oh, you're straw manning me." It's not that I mean, obviously, I think the Holocaust was wrong. I just don't think it was wrong. You know, stop straw manning me. And then, like, they have like different meanings of.
Well, I mean, they would say, "Well, I was against it," or you know, they probably weren't alive during the time. But anyway, I now have bad feelings about it. I have a negative attitude towards it. Right, but it's not that it had the property of wrongness, right? So
right. Well, the one paper that I've read about this that someone sent to me is like, you know, well, I'm an error theorist, but like, here's what I mean. Like, here's why I still walk around. And, you know, I walk the earth like a normal person, making evaluative judgments, even though I'm an error theorist. And the answer was something like fictionalism. It was a paper by someone named Joyce who said like, yeah, Richard Joyce. He said that you know, this is just a form of fictionalism. Like, it's a useful fiction, you know, which is something that Mackey apparently suggested at the very end of his book about error theory. And they're like, look, fictionalism is like not a crazy position. So, you know, moral fictionalism is like not a crazy position. But.
Yeah. So like, as an analogy, you know, somebody asks you, hey, was Jar Jar Binks a Sith Lord? And then you go, no, he's just a Gungan, whatever. Okay. And then, you know, the person goes, oh, so you think Jar Jar Binks existed? Right? So said he was a bumbling Gungan, whatever. That implies that he existed. So, you know, don't you know that all of those were fictional stories? So anyway, like if you're in a group of Star Wars fans and they're talking about the movies, you just talk about the things in the movies and as if they were real. So, and Darth Vader did this and then whatever. Okay. So, you know, you might think, you know, even if you're a nihilist, you sort of like go along with this discourse about these fictional moral properties and just participate in the game. And, you know, like within the game, there are correct and incorrect statements. So actually there's some good evidence that Jar Jar is a Sith Lord. So that's not a good example. So let's say somebody says Han Solo was a Sith Lord, right? You're like, no. So that is an incorrect statement in the Star Wars universe. So you might say, if somebody says, oh, the Holocaust was justified. No, that's an incorrect statement within the whole like moral talk framework, right?
Within the moral verse, it was wrong, clearly.
Yeah. Okay, but you know, even after you say that, like I would still wonder, okay, so like you can kind of make sense of people making these statements when they're like playing this sort of language game or whatever, but it would be hard to understand why you would make major sacrifices because of those statements, right? So like, okay, so if I think Jar Jar was a Sith Lord, I'm not now going to plan my life according to the facts about Jar Jar and the fictional Star Wars characters. I'm not going to behave in the way that I would if I thought those things were real. So like, I'm not going to like look for Jedi to help me or whatever, like, or, you know, try to use the Force or something the way I would if I literally believed statements about the Force. Okay. So it's very strange if you think that after making fictional statements about moral properties, you would behave just as if they were real.
What is even remotely strange about this? So when people say things like the remarks that you make can carry more than one type of content. So an error theorist thinks that in addition to whatever else people are saying and doing when they make moral claims, one of the things that they're doing is attempting to describe stance-independent moral facts. And they think that that is where these phrases go wrong. That does not mean that they don't care about all the pragmatic features that are associated with what moral claims typically serve to do. So if I'm really against baby torture, typically one way I might say that is baby torture is wrong. Baby torture is immoral. We should stop baby tortures. I use moral language to convey, on the error theorist view, both an attempt to describe the objective moral facts and my attitudes, values, and commitments. I'm not just describing objective moral facts. I'm also expressing attitudes. There's pragmatic features. The error theorist has every reason. It's not like if error theory turns out to be true, that there's we stop caring about things, that it wouldn't make sense for a person to be opposed to someone like torturing their family to death. It wouldn't make sense for them to oppose someone trying to steal their wallet. They don't want their family to be tortured. They don't want to have their wallet stolen. And so if it turns out that there's this commitment and this feature of the way everyday moral language works that turns out to be mistaken, it doesn't mean that they lose, that they have to abandon everything. You don't have to throw out the pragmatic bathwater with the semantic baby. Has Huemer just not considered this? Whereas in the case of fictional talk about Star Wars, yeah, you're not going to live your life by your beliefs about Jedi and the Sith, but you sure as hell are going to live your life by what you care about, what you value. So the mistake error theorists are making is to cleave so closely to what moral realists believe in. They should just distance themselves even further. But there's nothing strange about what error theorists are doing. Just suppose it turned out, as a matter of historical fact, that all over the world, people thought that all food came from the gods. And so they thought, and it was like a non-negotiable feature of the way that they thought about food, that it was divine. So apples are divine. Pie is divine. If you make food, you're imbued with the power of the spirits, supernatural forces to create the food. All food is divine, even man-made food. It's all divine. Now, if someone comes along and they go, look, I think food is real, but I don't think it's divine. Now that person is stuck in a quandary. If they want to use language the way everyone else does, they're going to have to say, yeah, technically food doesn't exist. So because food is divine, and that's like analytically, that's a feature of food. It's just one of the things about food is that it comes from God. Now, if that person goes, well, technically I don't believe in food, does that mean that they're just going to have to starve to death at this point? No, because there's that stuff on the table. There's that pie on the table. There's that salad on the table. There's that burger on the table. That might not technically be food, but at that point they're going to say, okay, well, it's food, and I need food to live. Is that inexplicable? Does that not make sense? Of course it makes sense. Same thing, like imagine water. People just insisted part of the concept of water is that it was a sentient being. It was a spirit. All water is one universal spirit. So you don't believe that? So that's what everyone else uses the word water to mean. So now what? You're just going to die of thirst? You're going to die of dehydration? That'd be ridiculous. Of course you can care about being hydrated, even if you don't believe literally in water, where water just means a sentient, supernatural, omnipresent force in the world. So I don't know why Huemer thinks that this is some kind of win against error theorists. It's not at all. Let's take that back. Right. You can see my point.
For real. So like, I'm not going to look for Jedi to help me or whatever, or try to use the Force or something the way I would if I literally believed statements about the Force. Okay, so it's very strange if you think that after making fictional statements about moral properties, you would behave just as if they were real.
Right. Yeah. There's because I do defend religious fictionalists. I think that's like a legitimate thing, but there is obviously a distinction between fictionalists and non-fictionalists. It's not that secular Jews are liars, or people who are Christian fictionalists are lying or something. But clearly there's a difference if you think that there's a God who's commanding you to keep kosher or something, because I know some secular Jews, I know some observant, I don't know, non-fictionalist Jews, just, and they, they just have completely different attitudes about almost everything, because some of them literally believe it, and some of them, just kind of respect the tradition, and they have other reasons for following it. But
yeah, that makes sense. There's a big difference between literally believing in a God and an afterlife and the efficacy of prayer and whatever theological notions a person might believe in, and not literally believing in that. Whereas in the case of being an error theorist, what's the practical difference between thinking that there are objective moral truths that oblige us to act in certain ways, and not thinking there's objective moral truths, but nevertheless wanting to act in exactly the same ways? There's not a significant practical difference. So if anything, the error theoretic fictionalist makes a lot more sense. So if any, maybe Emerson is drawing, I think, maybe the opposite lesson from this. Very little is lost when you reject realism. And so there's nothing strange about an error theorist acting like a fictionalist. There's an obvious reason to do so, because for prudential reasons, for practical reasons, it's useful to talk this way. What's so bizarre about that? What's so strange about that?
But I mean, I don't know if fictionalism is the most apt description of secular Judaism, but still, it's there are some people who literally believe playing the game, even though they don't like literally think it's true. But there's still an obvious difference, you know, between the people who literally think it's true and the people who don't. And yeah, I don't know why you would make any serious sacrifices if you're just some kind of moral fictionalist.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, so like, let's say, oh, you know, you read Peter Singer's arguments about famine relief. And you're like, wow, okay, I'm obligated to give money to charity, and now, and you're supposed to like give away a lot, like, so I got to give away thousands of dollars, right? Okay, but then I reflect on the fact that, yeah, but that's all just like a fiction. So like, what would be my rational reason for doing it after
You might be convinced, given your own commitments and principles, that it would be a nice thing to do or a good thing to do. You don't have to think you're obligated in some objective sense. I'm puzzled at their puzzlement about this.
I recognize that according to the game, I'm supposed to give away whatever, tens of thousands of dollars. So what? If I thought that they
Has it occurred to Huemer that some people want to play the game?
were like objective moral properties, right? Like on the realist view, well, there's no so what question, like you automatically have reason to do that. But if the thing is just fictional, then it's unclear how it gives you a reason. Maybe it gives you a reason.
It doesn't have to give you a reason.
Because like you just like playing this game, like.
Yeah, I mean, Moxie asks a good question here. Why would being objectively obligated make me want to do it? It may or may not. A lot of realists are externalists about motivation. So, you know, here Huemer is saying, well, if it's objectively true, you would have a reason to do it. Yeah, but you might just not give a shit about that. Whereas if you're an anti-realist, you might go, oh, well, I do want to do that. I didn't, you know, an anti-realist might think, oh, I never thought about how, given my own views, you know, they might think, well, given my own views, there's not really any good distinction, like any real distinction I care about between, you know, a child drowning in a pond right next to me and a similar cost to saving a child overseas. So given that consideration, in light of that consideration, I think I should go give to children overseas. Not should in the realist sense, but they could think I want to, like, remove the normative language if they want to be an error theorist about that, or they could be a fictionalist about it. But it might cause a shift in their motivations or their values. That's what prompts people's action. It's actually the realist where either they're an externalist and they would have to acknowledge that the person could just go, I don't care if that gives me a reason, I'm not motivated, or they would think that maybe a person is motivated to comply with these objective moral facts. Oh, I have a reason. Good. Well, I want to do that. Either way, what it's going to come down to, whether you're a realist or an anti-realist, ultimately is the motivation of the person. What drives a person to donate to that charity isn't merely the fact that objectively they're obligated to do so, and that therefore they have a reason independent of their goals, standards, or desires. The only way to get that person to act is for them to actually have the motivation to do so. Now, the anti-realist can offer a pretty straightforward account for why a person would donate to charity. They want to. Whereas, what's the realist explanation? They could give the same explanation. Oh, well, they donate to charity because they want to. Great. So what work are the external reasons doing? What work are the objective moral obligations doing? Is it that the person wants to do whatever those are? They find out that that's what they are, and then they go do it. Well, then there's motivation is still there. It's just that the objective moral facts are a kind of middleman, but between like the metaphysical truths and their action. Well, sorry, I should say their motivation is still a middleman between the objective moral facts and their action. You still need that motivation in there to get them to act. Now, realists can offer an alternative conception where they don't think that this sort of view of, like, maybe someone would say I'm being a Humean here or something kind of like a Humean. I would have a view that would probably be more quietistic than that, but whatever. If they want to offer an alternative account, but an error theorist may or may not endorse that other account, or an error theorist may endorse other sort of extraneous views outside their strict commitment to error theory. They could have some particular view about motivation. They could have some particular view about their goals or their desires, their attitudes, and how they relate to their action. So there's a variety of resources that are potentially available to an error theorist where there would be nothing even remotely mysterious about them acting on their goals and desires in light of like Singer's pond scenario or something like that. Whereas it might actually simultaneously be the case that the moral realist still has a rather weird story to tell that seems to possibly collapse in some ways into looking like it's got to pass through much of what the anti-realist already has available to them, which would make much of what the realist is offering rather explanatorily superfluous. It's very burdensome. Like, hey, I do what I want to. Oh, you do what you want to, and you want to do whatever the objective moral facts are. So once you figure those out, then you're going to do them. Well, in both cases, your desires are still in the driver's seat. So if realists don't, again, an error theorist may reject that too, but it's not clear that they have to. And if they don't, then they have a pretty straightforward explanation available to them. Also, if this isn't how people think voluntary action works, I'd love to hear how they think it works.
When you're playing chess and you're just like playing that, okay, because it's fun, but like, man, it's got to be super fun to justify giving away $10,000, right? Right? And I just don't think it is.
And people don't just do stuff because it's fun. They do stuff because they don't want to feel guilty. They do stuff because they have a genuine sense of altruism. I mean, come on, Huemer. Come on. People, I know all kinds of anti-realists. There's tons and tons of anti-realists in the effective altruist community. Do you know why they give money away to people? Because they want to, because they like doing so, because they think it like feels good, because they think it's the right thing to do according to their personal standards and commitments. They don't have to think it's objectively. It's not like, I mean, look, do we think people's actions are, if they're not a realist, that they're just going to be a totally fun-loving, hedonistic, selfish asshole that doesn't care about other people? People care about other people because they just do. They don't need an external impetus to do so. So, I mean, he's describing it like the error theorist is some ridiculous person. Why would they want to like help other people? People just want to help other people. They don't need a rule book floating in the void to tell them that they are obligated to help other people to be motivated to do so.
Yeah. So I take it that you're not very impressed by the anti-realist attempts to like rephrase moral statements into something that's like acceptable to them. One thing I've learned about listening to moral anti-realists, especially error theorists, is that there are seemingly zero implications of moral anti-realism, according to anti-realists. Like you might.
Yeah, I endorse this view. I mean, I don't know if it's exactly zero, but if there are implications, they're probably fairly negligible. There might be implications to people believing realism or anti-realism is true, but those would be. But if so, those would be contingent features of the interaction between certain sorts of beliefs and like facts about contingent features of human psychology. So it could be that some people would be absolutely miserable or depressed if they were convinced moral anti-realism is true. That's not an implication of anti-realism. That's an implication of humans under those cultural or psychological conditions believing moral anti-realism. So it would have nothing to do with whether the view is true or whether the view carried like bad implications. I mean, you could call those like secondary implications or contingent implications, and views can certainly have those. But like whether the view has like entailments for how one is expected to act or something, I don't think so. Yeah, if there are any, I haven't heard of them. I mean, there's trivial ones. So here's an expectation or difference in what you would expect from realists and anti-realists. For anti-realists to say, I'm an anti-realist, and for realists to say, I'm a realist, there's one expected difference in their actions. And you do observe that. Like, notice how many times I say I'm an anti-realist. I don't say I'm a realist at the same rate as realists do. That'd be real weird. So there are some behavioral implications, but they're not very practically significant.
I think naively that rejecting like all moral claims as false might have like some discernible impact on your life. But apparently,
notice like the laughing, like they just think this is hilarious. I mean, that's fine, but if it's so funny, what's funny about it?
According to acceptable to them. One thing I've learned about listening to moral anti-realists, especially error theorists, is that there are seemingly zero implications of moral anti-realism, according to anti-realists. Like you might think naively that rejecting like all moral claims as false might have like some discernible impact on your life. But apparently I'm a moron for.
Yeah, I mean, the laughing here seems to be serving the function of scoffing. And I'm usually not very impressed by scoffing. So, I mean, go ahead and scoff. But if you've got an objection, let's hear it.
Thinking that would be the case. So I just hear it all the time that like if you try to draw out the implications of their view and be like, hey, doesn't that seem implausible? Or like, if you think that like nothing is wrong, shouldn't that influence your behavior in some way? Like, like once I stopped thinking that God was real, there was a discernible impact on my behavior. Like I started behaving differently because there was this thing that
I mean, Emerson, maybe this is a sign that there's something especially vacuous and pointless about moral realism, whereas I don't think that about the existence of God. I think if the Christian God existed, for instance, that would be a very big deal. And that's why that's the sort of question I would take a lot more seriously than moral realism. Moral realism doesn't matter. It's irrelevant if it's true or not. I mean, if it was true, look, if moral realism were true and we had access to what the stance independent moral facts were, I mean, there's a few things that could happen. If those moral facts happen to exactly align with what I was already supposed to do, my behavior wouldn't change. If the moral facts weren't aligned with my behavior, or sorry, if the moral facts, sorry, let me start over. Okay, moral realism turns out it's true. And we've got a list of all the stance independent moral facts are. Now, if in any way those facts differ from my personal moral commitments, I'm not going to act on them. I don't care. So it makes no difference. If they're identical, then I was already going to do that anyway. So it would make no difference. So for comparison, let's say I go to a restaurant. I decide I want to get the cupcake, right? I'm going to get, that's a weird restaurant, but I'm going to get the margarita flavored cupcake or whatever. We'll pick something weird. Now I'm going to get that cupcake. Now you tell me, hey, by the way, it's a stance independent gastronomic fact that you should get the margarita cupcake. Okay, well, I was going to do that anyway. Superfluous. Okay, so now you come along and you say, no, actually, it's a stance independent fact that you should get the red velvet cupcake. Well, I don't want that. I only care about my food preferences. I don't care what the stance independent gastronomic facts are. I'm still going to get the margarita cupcake. So you see, either way, it makes no difference. Yeah, moral realism is irrelevant. It wouldn't factor into my behavior at all, even if it was true, and even if I knew exactly what the moral facts are, because I don't give a shit what the moral facts are. I act on my values. Now, if you're a realist, is it that you are motivated to act on whatever it turns out the objective moral facts are? Because then it could make a difference for you if it's true, and you find out what the moral facts are. But that it would be like filtered through your motivations. Or if you don't care how, like one way or another, how is this supposed to work? Why would it be practically significant? What is the story that realists have to offer? So yeah, it doesn't seem like it should or does matter to me. Nothing about this seems mysterious.
Thought existed for most of my life, and then I stopped thinking it was real, and then my behavior changed as a result. But they're just like, yeah, I used to naively think that things were like right or wrong, and then now I don't think that, and I behave in exactly the same way as I did before.
Yes, that is very strange, right? And
yeah, what is strange about it? I really want to hear from them. What is strange about this? Like specifically, like write an article on it, do a video on it. Why is it strange to you? So like, let's say, I don't know, you're a gastronomic realist, and then you find out that there's no gastronomic facts. Are you going to stop eating the same foods that you've always liked? Why would it make any difference? So again, if you're a moral realist and you stop, like if Emerson stopped being a moral realist, would he just like stop caring about helping people? Would he stop being a nice person? Would he suddenly be okay with murder? I actually doubt it. I doubt that there would be any substantial change in Emerson's behavior. I don't know why they think this is strange. And if they, maybe they're going to go on to explain. I don't even remember if I watched the rest of this video. But what's strange about this?
Also strange if you just keep saying the same things. Like you think wrongness doesn't exist, but you still go around, you're talking to other people about what's right and wrong. And like, okay. And like, is there any other area in which this happens? Like where atheists just go around talking about what God wants all the time?
Right.
Like that would be really weird. And then like, after you become an atheist, you still keep going to church, you keep praying. Okay.
God will be very, God is angry with you, for violating like his commands. And it's like,
if this was a super useful way to talk that promoted cooperation, it made people happy. You were the only person that didn't think this way, or you were part of like 0.1% of the population, and everybody was absolutely and incorrigibly convinced God existed. That would be a situation similar to the situation the error theorist is in. So in that case, it actually strikes me as quite reasonable to keep talking about what God wants if it's super useful for society. And that's often the kind of thing that error theorists think, that this is really prudentially beneficial. Why would you speak in a way that would confuse people or make people hate you or cause problems just because it's true?
I thought you were an atheist. And it's like,
yeah, I mean, this is a good point. Like FFFFF says, also, we do say, thank God, for example. And I've gone to religious services after becoming an atheist. And I know atheists, or at least non-believers, that attend religious services, that pray, that get value out of these practices. So like a friend of mine who's been an atheist for many, many years started going back to religious services. Religious services can bring a sense of comfort, community. There's all sorts of practical reasons to be a religious fictionalist. And didn't Emerson just say that he had some sympathies for religious fictionalism. So is he not wanting to push back against humor? Because it seems like maybe there would be a motivation to disagree with humor here, and he's not expressing that. So I'm not seeing what's strange about this.
Stop straw manning me.
Yeah, but I'm just like expressing my feelings or something. Like, okay. Now, you might say, the anti-realist, to try to, I don't know, try to take their side. They'd be like, well, I mean, there's a difference in that, there are moral attitudes, and there are non-cognitive moral attitudes, which could explain your behavior. Like, you still have feelings of disapproval, and that explains why you try to stop people from doing the things that you disapprove of, even if you don't have the belief that they're wrong. And now you might say that's not analogous to religion, because there aren't additional attitudes besides the beliefs, right? Like, you believe that God wants you to do X, and then if you take away that belief, well, there's not like some other thing there, like a religious attitude that doesn't depend on the beliefs. Maybe, right? But I don't know if that's true. Maybe there is still a religious attitude.
In some cases, like, I don't think that like Christian fictionalism is crazy. Like, it's more prevalent, I guess, in like Western Europe or something. Like, people who still go to church and honor the tradition and stuff, like, they still participate in something resembling a religious life, even though they're like, well, I mean, I don't like literally think that like God commanded this or inspired the Bible or something like that. So I really don't think that fictionalism is crazy in many, many contexts, but it's like, you have to look at the specific area and like flesh it out. Like, it might be crazy to be a fictionalist in some areas, even though it's like totally fine to be a fictionalist about some things.
Yeah, I mean, so here might be an example. Let's say, okay, maybe you had some.
Yeah, I like that Emerson went ahead and defended certain kinds of fictionalism here. So I take back my objections. He did defend it. Good job, Emerson. I like that he said that. Respect. That's good.
Religious attitudes, and so like you feel approval and disapproval based upon what you learned about. And like, okay, so now you have negative views about abortion because you were taught that God hates abortion, and then you became an atheist. So now you believe that he doesn't hate abortion, but you still have negative attitudes about abortion. Don't believe it because he doesn't exist, right? But,
right.
Okay, but now you get pregnant, and you're thinking of having an abortion, and like the costs of going through with the pregnancy are very high. But if abortion is like seriously wrong, like murder or something, like you would still go through with it, right? But so it looks like this is a case in which you would have different behavior depending on whether you really believe that there's a God, or alternately you really believe that abortion is morally wrong in a way comparable to how murder is wrong, right?
Right.
And then like, and if you don't believe either of those things, but you just have negative feelings about abortion, it seems like the rational thing would be to just get over those feelings. So,
yeah, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The rational thing would be to get over the feelings. So realism isn't true. I don't have an obligation to my family. The rational thing is to get over my care for my family and just stop caring about my family. Why would that be any more or less rational than acting on my feelings? That doesn't make any sense. That's a very weird notion of rationality. What is he talking about?
Have different behavior.
Take that back.
Depending on whether you really believe that there's a God, or alternately you really believe that abortion is morally wrong in a way comparable to how murder is wrong, right?
Right.
And then like, and if you don't believe either of those things, but you just have negative feelings about abortion, it seems like the rational thing would be to just get over those feelings.
Yeah, okay, so there might be contexts in which the original basis for why you believe something, I guess I wasn't focusing enough on how he was leading up to this. If the original reason you were against abortion was for religious reasons, you undercut the religious reasons, you're now a fictionalist, you don't really have any secular reasons that sort of supplant the original reasons, then it might be the case. He might be right about that. That I would say, yeah, not real rational to continue acting on those feelings because the feelings are baseless. And that might be true for some of what an error theorist thinks. If they abandon their belief in God or they abandon their belief in morality, there might be certain sorts of things where their original basis for believing those things is undercut. But notice in the case of the religious fictionalist, like they don't literally think there's a God saying abortion bad. But in the moral case, their original opposition to, say, torturing babies or something wasn't rooted in some metaphysical beliefs that they think are wrong alone. They also just don't like it. They don't approve of it. So you take out the, hey, it's objectively wrong. You stop believing that. You still don't like baby torture. And there's not any particularly good reason to start not disliking it. So there's no reason for you to overcome that. So Huemer could very well be right that we can find cases where someone becoming a fictionalist about religion and or morality, given certain causal origins to why they hold that view, could undercut like the view, and we could say it's irrational for them to keep caring about it. But there's going to be lots of cases where that's just not the case. So like for me, I'm an anti-realist. I don't think there's objective moral facts. Would it be irrational for me to stop caring about my family or stop caring about baby torture? No, I don't like those things. And that's good enough for it to be rational for me to try to oppose those things. At least I think it's rational, and an error theorist is not committed to it being irrational. So, I mean, I don't think that this is doing much to show that there's some problem with error theory.
You don't have to go through this really high cost.
Right. Well,
I mean, like this really high cost. What is the high cost?
It's about abortion. It seems like the rational thing would be to just get over those feelings so that you don't have to go through this really high cost.
Oh,
right.
Sure. Okay. No, sorry, I'm being silly. He literally specified a scenario where there would be a high cost. So yeah, sure. I agree with him about that scenario. But as I said, I think there's going to be a lot of scenarios that this isn't going to apply. And I don't think that this is demonstrating that like error theorists or fictionalists are irrational. It's just coming up with a contrived scenario in which it's possible for a person, given a bunch of other contingent features of their psychology, to have lingering residual irrational commitments. Sure. Okay. But that seems to be uniquely attributable to a person that what is a religious fictionalist. It wouldn't create a similar problem for a person that's just an error theorist about morality. So a person that's an error theorist and they stop thinking baby torture or stealing or murdering or whatever, they stop thinking it's objectively wrong, but they still have exactly the same attitude about all of those things. Nothing about that would make it irrational for them to continue to act on those attitudes. So we haven't shown anything to be especially objectionable about moral error theory here.
Well, I mean, another example that, it actually does happen with a lot of people is feelings towards like gay marriage, like where there really is no independent reason to be against gay marriage unless you're some kind of theist. Like there's a really strong correlation between theism and like opposition to gay marriage. And once you become an atheist, or if you're pretty much all of those people, like the vast majority of those people, are totally fine with gay marriage, whereas the realists and like the literalists, like they are not fine with gay marriage. So it really just comes down to if there's some kind of independent motivation for whatever moral claim is at stake. So like in the case of opposition to gay marriage, there's like virtually no independent support for opposition to gay marriage, like outside of like literalist, realist, theistic beliefs. And once you get rid of
I don't have an issue with this, but it's like a digression where yeah, he might just be right about this. There's not going to be a good secular argument. Interesting question from Analytic Philosophy. If moral realists like Huemer believe we perceive moral truths through intellectual intuitions, would they say that those who lack such phenomenology aren't morally responsible for the actions they do? Yeah. So if I'm conceptually impoverished and I'm incapable of seeing the moral truths, am I off the hook morally? Somehow I doubt that he would say that. Like how colorblind people aren't blameworthy for failing to see red, right? Or maybe less morally responsible. Yeah, are we at least less morally responsible? Yeah, it's a good question.
rid of those, then your behavior discernibly changes. But that might not be the case with like, stealing, because there's independent reason not to steal, unlike gay marriage.
Sure. Yeah. No, stealing negatively impacts my life. If there's a lot of stealing going on in society, but gay marriage doesn't negatively impact me. Yeah, I mean that's a good example. So because illustrates some of the complexity of human psychology. Because I think that what's going on. Okay, so I think you're right that there's a connection with religion, but it's a little bit weird because the religious people don't take on board everything that the Bible says. Right, so like they, even the people who think gay people shouldn't be allowed to get married, typically don't think that you should stone them to death, even though the Bible does say that. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
And why not? Well, because they have like some independent moral judgment. Okay, and so it's like they have a negative feeling about gay marriage. They have a negative feeling about homosexuality in general, and so that leads them to think that or it leads them to feel that gay marriage would be wrong, but they don't have such a negative feeling that they want to murder them, and like they have a negative feeling about murdering people. Okay, but then you might think, but is the religious belief playing any role? And I think basically the role that it's playing is that you have these negative feelings, and then you sort of like reach for an explanation. And if you can find a cognitive explanation, like you can find an explanation in terms of your beliefs for why this negative feeling is justified, then you feel justified in acting on it and like supporting policies based on it. Okay, but if when you give up the beliefs and then you think that it's just a negative feeling and there's no like basis for it, then you don't feel justified, right? So that's my explanation. Like, so even if they have the same feelings before and after becoming an atheist, right? Like the religious person would support legal restrictions that the atheist wouldn't, right?
Yeah. Do you want to get into some?
All right, so they're moving on to the next topic, which is phenomenal conservatism, scientism, skepticism. There will be plenty of stuff for me to comment on there. So we got through 50 minutes of this. We're about halfway through, and we've done 2 parts, so maybe this will end up being a 4-parter. I'm going to wrap it up there. I am super hungry. Got to go have dinner. Any last comments, questions? I'll give you all a couple minutes. Oh, we got to close out the poll and see the results to that. Throw in your comments if you got them while we wrap up here. Let's see. In the poll, we ended up with 50 votes. And 69%, we got 69% and 30%. So what the heck happened there? Why is there 69 and 30? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Do you have any distinctive phenomenology when you consider your reaction to the footbridge dilemma? 70% of you said no, and 30% of you said yes. So I do think that's some evidence. It's very, 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 very weak evidence. This is a very biased sample. So let's consider it marginal, virtually negligible evidence that, yeah, maybe there's something to what I'm saying here, that people are not having these intellectual experiences that Huemer's talking about. All right, that was cool. Anything else to say? I stopped paying attention to the chat at a certain point, like I skimmed it just to make sure nobody's saying something too awful. I might have missed it if I did. I got mods. Nathan, you're in charge of that. Sapir, I don't see you in the chat anymore. I don't know if you're still around. Glenn Capel says, how does Huemer account for moral change given his direct seeing, perception, intuition? Good question. I think that intuitionists are typically going to think that certain sorts of basic things are pretty perceptible, but that more complicated stuff might not be, and that we need to do reasoning and philosophy. Obviously, Huemer doesn't think. You just think and you're done with all moral issues in some sort of direct way. You have to do reasoning, philosophy, arguments, thought experiments. It's not that easy to figure out the nuances of things. And so people work through them over time. And like we reason, we accumulate knowledge. Philosophers read works of previous philosophers, and we get better over time, and we gradually converge on, that's I haven't heard him say specifically that, but I don't think he's going to have a huge problem in his view with dealing with this. And in fact, he has actually presented an argument for moral realism called the argument for moral convergence, where he argues, given historically the convergence of people's moral values over time, that's the best explanation for that is moral realism. All right. Okay, True Taylor says, yeah, I don't have the intellectual appearances. Okay, well, I guess that's it for the stream. Thanks everybody for being here. If you enjoyed this stream, do like the video, leave a comment in the comment section. Subscribe to the channel if you weren't subscribed already. Share the video around, let people know about it. Maybe Emerson will see the video. I doubt Mike Huemer will, but I'd be happy to talk to either of them about metaethics anytime, as long as I'm available. And again, thank you all for being here. Really appreciate you all. Check the link in the description. You could see the original video if you want to see that. If you do leave a comment on Emerson's video, do be kind, do be polite. I do not promote online toxicity, whether it's YouTube or anywhere else. I don't like people being assholes, so don't go over there and be a jerk. Don't go over there and say, let's crush you with facts and logic. That stuff is silly. Don't do that. So yeah, be polite if you go leave a comment there. What else? Oh, I got a link to my link tree, which takes you to all my other stuff. So you can check that out. I got a Discord. I got a blog. A lot of people that read the blog don't go to the YouTube channel. A lot of people on the YouTube channel don't read the blog. So check that out. There's other stuff over in the blog. You could see what my writing's like. I got like other stuff you could see about my personal page, like Patreon and that kind of stuff, if you want to support me and the channel and all that. So with all that being said, see you all later. I really appreciate the lively, active chat. I love it so much. It really does give me a sense that I'm not alone out here. You know, to tell you something a little more personal, you know, I moved out here, what, 9 months ago or something at this point, and I haven't made any friends out here in person. I don't hang out with people. I'm very isolated. I got my dogs. One of my dogs came up here a little earlier. So my wife is here. If I didn't already mention, for those of you, I did mention in one other stream, I've got a baby coming at the end of the summer, and everything's going well so far. So when that happens, I will be on hiatus. I don't know if or when I'm going to get back here. Sorry, I'm making it seem like I'm not going to come back. I'm absolutely going to come back, but it's probably going to be a bit less than before because I'm going to be busy with baby and with having child and having a family that I need to spend a lot more time with. But who knows? Maybe I'll get really efficient with my time and be more productive and have just as much time to do streams. It's probably going to be a bit less though. But I'm still going to be around, but there might be a few months where I'm mostly away. I got the TikTok videos. I got all those lined up. One of them, there seems to be some kind of bug or error with it, and that might not work. I don't know how to fix that stuff. But you'll be seeing those older TikTok videos. I might be doing more this summer, but I'm going to have a very busy summer. I'm moving at the end of the week, so you're going to see a new setup. I don't know how many days it's going to take for me to get back on the stream. I got some other work to finish up. So you might not see me for a week or two. We'll see. But then I'll be back. I'll have a new place, and you'll see yet another background. Again, I know I've been moving a lot. So those are all the announcements. And thank you. Salman says, congrats, Lance. Thank you. Appreciate it. And with that, I will see you all later. Take care. And yeah, have a good night.